Bleach 1000 Year Blood War episode 34 titled Baby Hold Your Hand adapts just over 4 chapters worth of manga material. Now this is taking into consideration content that has already been adapted and stuff that has been restructured to be shown later. This latest episode adapts material from chapters 635 to the beginning of chapter 640. Now following last week's episode, which had over 10 minutes of anime original content, which featured the amazing battle between Uryu and Renji, episode 34 focuses on adapting a solid chunk of manga content as we begin Mayuri's battle against Pernida. The first half of the episode adapts material from the midpoint of chapter 635 to the middle of chapter 638. This is up until the point that Mayuri's sunsuit explodes after Pernida supposedly crushes him. The second half of the episode has a similar pacing as we have the rest of chapter 638, which is adapted until the first page of chapter 640. Now episode 34 remains very faithful to the manga aside from 2 minor additions, one involving Lil Barrow at the very beginning of the episode and then a new scene after the mid-card which features the Sternritters Lil Toto, Giselle and Baz B. Now be sure to stick around until the very end of this video in order to find out what these new additions are all about. Now we have quite a lot to discuss here, so let's dive into the manga versus anime analysis of the latest episode of Bleach, and as always I'll be refraining from talking about scenes which are one-to-one adaptations from the manga, and I'll solely be focusing on what has been cut, changed and added to the anime. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Hollow Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. So this episode begins with a brief recap of the final moments between Uryu versus Renji. Following this, we get a shot of Lil Barrow, who appears to have had his gun aimed at Uryu as he was watching the fight similar to Hashwald. After taking his aim off of Uryu, he then returns his attention to the Shinigami who he was targeting earlier. Now following this, we then begin to adapt material from the midpoint of chapter 635. Now most of chapter 635, which involves the scenes between Grimmjow and Askin, was adapted into last week's episode. This is with the exception to the first few pages of the chapter, which has been left for later. Now this is where Yhwach defeats both Giselle and Lil Toto. Instead of this, the episode has Kinpachi and Mayuri confronting Pernida, as Kinpachi makes the first move attacking Pernida, only to discover that his right arm has been completely chewed up. When Pernida's head begins to enlarge and Kinpachi and Mayuri react to it, the episode then cuts to the opening. Genuinely, I am so impressed with how well the anime had adapted material from the manga, as everything was a panel for panel adaptation. Not a single line of dialogue was skipped, and this is to be noted because these chapters which were adapted into episode 34 were very dialogue heavy, and there were some comedic interactions, especially between Ikkaku, Yumichika and Nemu. So yeah, all of this comedic banter was left intact, as the episode begins by adapting all of chapter 636 very faithfully. After Kinpachi is paralyzed by Mayuri, we have Mayuri explain the nature of Pernida's powers, and when he talks about how Quincy powers work by pouring the power of Reishi into their own veins, we get this flashback sequence of Ichigo cutting down the Soul King, where we see these blue Quincy veins along his right arm, as his body was controlled by the will of Yhwach, as it perfectly illustrates Mayuri's point when he talks about the nature of Quincy powers. As yeah, the rest of chapter 636 is adapted faithfully, all the way up until Mayuri states that he's going to enjoy testing countless drugs on the nervous system of Pernida. Material from chapter 637 is then adapted when Mayuri speaks with the paralyzed Kinpachi. All of this again is faithfully adapted, including the dialogue between Ikkaku, Yumichika and Nemu. So the anime does add some additional context during Mayuri's umbrella scene. This is where Pernida uses its nerves to attack the umbrella that Mayuri holds up multiple times. Within the manga, things weren't really clear here, but the anime elaborates upon this by showing the nerves trying to pierce the umbrella multiple times. And we also get this scene of Mayuri pulling out a second umbrella as he defends against the nerves of Pernaida. Now all of this happens while Mayuri is saying the dialogue from the manga, so if anything, these anime exclusive editions expand upon what is shown in the manga by giving us just a bit more context and making things more clearer for us. So all of chapter 637 is then adapted, ending with Pernaida revealing its name to Mayuri. Immediately following this, we get the first half of chapter 638 adapted, and again, similar to the umbrella scene, the anime adds a little bit more context to when Mayuri is escaping from the concrete hands that Pernaida is controlling. So we get content adapted up until the middle of chapter 638, where Mayuri appears to have been crushed by the two concrete hands. We then cut to the mid-card of the episode, as this week's mid-cards focus on Pernaida and the second focuses on Hairen-hyaku. The mid-card reveals that Hairen-hyaku is a high-level Quincy technique and is done by gathering and manipulating reishi at the feet, as it allows the user to perform high-speed movement. Mayuri has adapted the mechanics of Hairen-hyaku to suit his own purposes. Now this mid-card is a bit of a spoiler for the second half of the episode, as we haven't seen Mayuri use Hairen-hyaku yet, as the mid-card continues to explain that this technique enables swift movement through the surrounding flow of reishi particles. Mayuri was able to create a similar technique to Hairen-hyaku, as it allows him to have more stable and precise high-speed movement in comparison to Shunpo, which is used by the Shinigami, or the Sonido, which is used by the Arrancar. So the second half of the episode begins with this brief anime exclusive scene between Giselle, Lil Toto and Baz B, where Lil Toto says to Baz B that it appears as though he has some history with Hashwald, as she tells him that he can handle him while her and Giselle will handle Yhwach. Baz B then gloats that he'll take both of them down, with Giselle adding that she is excited to see both Hashwald and Yhwach as zombies. Baz B then tells them to get going as the brief anime exclusive scene ends. So really it's nothing more than a brief pep talk, and it's scenes like this which do a great job of defining these characters, as the Sternritters in the manga version of the 1000 Year Blood War arc had nowhere near enough screen time in comparison to other villain groups like the Arrancar. So yeah, I'm always welcoming of editions like this, even if this brief pep talk is a prelude to a massacre. So then the second half of chapter 638 is faithfully adapted into the anime, as during Mayuri's explanation of Hairen-hyaku, the anime does show us flashback scenes of Uryu using this technique way back during the Huecomundo arc, and we also get scenes of Soken and Ryuken Ishida. So content from chapter 638 ends after Pernaida had attempted to control the arm of Mayuri, but in retaliation Mayuri had quickly reconfigured the arrangement of the nerves, blood vessels and muscles of his right arm, telling Pernaida that it's not going to be that easy to take over his body. As the episode wraps up, we then get material from chapter 639. This is where Mayuri's iconic modified Bankai, Konjigi Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukuen Shotai is first revealed. So this is finally adapted within the anime. So again, chapter 639 is all faithfully adapted, all the way up until Mayuri's Bankai devours Pernaida, along with the two clones that it has created from its fingers. Episode 34 ends with this manga panel adapted from the first page of chapter 640, where Mayuri is laughing uncontrollably as we cut to the credits. Now, there is no post-credit scene in this week's episode, and well, yeah, it's hard to say anything critical about this episode since it was so faithfully adapted from the manga. Core 3 has been on a generational run. While this episode didn't really feature a lot of anime original content, it was still an excellent installment which helped to bring to life one of the most iconic 1000 Year Blood War arc fights. The entire Mayuri vs Pernaida fight spans almost 9 chapters, thus making it one of the most fleshed out battles in the manga. So there isn't really any need for anime exclusive expansion here. Despite saying this, I would have still loved to learn more information about Pernaida's backstory, and while there is a chance that we may get this in the upcoming episodes, for now it seems like the second half of Mayuri vs Pernaida is on hold as we switch to Shunsui vs Lil Barrow with episode 35, which is revealed to be titled Don't Chase a Shadow. This is named after chapter 645 of the manga. The anime staff in interviews have said that they had wanted to try to convey that these battles are occurring simultaneously, because the manga did have a tendency to focus on one fight until its conclusion and then move on to the next one. The anime is already restructuring a lot of the manga content, like Hashwald vs Baz B, which takes place from chapters 639 630 to 634, which we know is pushed back, and I'm assuming that they're saving it for the finale of Core 3. I do hope that we're going to be getting more additions that will expand upon both of their backstory, as I'm really looking forward to next week's episode with Shunsui finally getting his big fight from this story arc animated next. I'm also excited to see what other restructuring of the manga material will be done and what new additions will be included in order to expand upon the remaining fights for Core 3. So we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the latest Bleach episode? What do you think about all of the manga material that was adapted? Did you enjoy Kinpachi's brief clash against Pernida? Did you like hearing the incredible voice acting of Mayuri and Pernida? And what were your thoughts about Mayuri's modified Bankai, which was finally animated? Do continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you next week for my complete breakdown and analysis of episode 35 of the all-new Bleach 1000 Year Blood War arc anime.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.